Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome back to Chapter 17. We're talking about plants. The last time, in the last video, we were talking about flowers and fruits. Remember that a flower is both male and female. The center of the flower is called the carpel, and it's what contains the ovaries. Surrounding that carpel are the anthers, and those anthers are the male portion. The carpel is the female portion. The anther is the male portion, and it makes the pollen. Once the egg gets pollinated, once it gets fertilized, it will grow into this thing that we call a seed. Seeds are often held within a fruit. The job of a fruit is to disperse the seed, and anything that comes from a flower is considered to be a fruit. Good tasting fruits are meant to be eaten by animals, and the animal is therefore supposed to carry that good fruit away, far away from the parent plant, and then drop it. When you think of fruit, you think of apples and oranges and bananas and things. But understand that if it comes from a flower, it is a fruit. That is the biology definition. So a tomato is a fruit, a cucumber is a fruit, a bean, a pea, those are all fruits. Corn, for that matter, is even fruit. Some other things that you don't recognize as fruit at all would be like maple fruit or dandelions or cockleburrs. And let's have a look at those. This is a little puffball. There's probably some in your yard right now. A little puffball of dandelion. This is a single seed at the bottom of the dandelion puff. This little parachute up here, its job is to disperse the seed. It's supposed to be carried by the wind, and who didn't pick up one of these and blow all the little seeds off of it when you were a kid and watch little fuzz drift off into the yard? This is the dandelion fruit. This is meant to disperse the seed. This is a cocklebur right here. You probably had something like that stuck to your pants, stuck to your dog. If you were out going for a walk in the woods somewhere. This is a seed. It has, inside of that rather, is a seed. Inside of that burr is a seed. The seed has hooks on it, and that's what the hooks are meant to do. The hooks are meant to get caught in the fur of mammals, and then for that animal to carry that burr really far away from the parent plant, and eventually it will drop off. Eventually the animal will shed at the very least, and maybe several months later. But the cocklebur will drop off, and when it does, it will have dispersed the seed far away from the parent plant. These are fruits, and of course there's a berry. A fruit, the job of the fruit is to disperse the seed. One of the things that I said in on the previous slide talked about a maple fruit. You've probably seen one. A maple fruit, it looks like this. You seen a little something like that? It looks like a little wing. It's got a little hard spot at the one end. That's where the seed is. And then this wing, its job is to be caught literally by the wind and to be a literal wing and to disperse the seed. This is maple fruit. Maybe some of y'all had a maple tree in your yard, and when I was a kid, we did, and I played with these things. You just pick them up and throw them up in the air, and they spin and swirl back down to the ground. Maple fruit. All right. So we just finished up talking about plants. Remember, we're doing the survey of life. We talked about bacteria. We talked about archaea. We're talking now about eukaryotes. We've talked about protists. We did that in the previous chapter. We just finished talking about plants, and now it's time to move on to fungi. Fungi, there are about 100,000 species of fungi. Remember, how many species of plants were there? Give or take about 300,000. Of those 300,000, 275,000 of them are flowering plants. 20,000 species of mosses, about 10,000 species of ferns, about 25,000 species of conifers. Anyway, now we move on to fungi. About 100,000 species of fungi. The only thing that makes them similar to plants is the fact they grow in the ground and they have a cell wall. Aside from that, they're not like plants at all. They make their cell wall out of a completely different structure. They make it out of something called chitin. Please don't say chitin. It's not chitin. It's chitin. It's a hard CH. They make their cell walls out of this stuff called chitin. Fungi don't have to just grow in the ground. They can grow on plants. They can grow in the soil. They can grow on a number of things. And they are heterotrophs. Remember, a plant is an autotroph. A plant is going to make all of its own food. Fungi don't. They can't make their food. They have to live off of other things. For the most part, they're decomposers. They live off of dead things. Fungi do. So again, heterotrophs. When you think of a fungus, you think of a mushroom. You know, something like this. Mushrooms. All right. You've probably seen something like that. A bracket fungus growing off of a tree. We'll talk about those things and look at them in a little while. But these are what you should think of when you think of a fungus. When you think fungus, you probably think, ew, gross, just like in the bacteria chapter. Bacteria, bad! There's 100,000 species of bacteria, and how many of them are bad? About 100. So 1 in 1,000 are bad, and it's pretty much the same situation with fungi. How many of them are bad? Very few of them are actually bad. Most of them are harmless, if not outright beneficial. We use fungi for a lot of things. Lots of people love to eat mushrooms. Sauteed mushrooms, a little bit of salt and pepper on there, a little bit of spice, good stuff. Lots of people love to eat mushrooms. Yeast is a fungus. Yeast is for leavening bread. Depending on when you're watching this, lots of people around the spring of 2020 started to make lots of bread because it was difficult to go out to the store. Our first antibiotics were found and made from fungi. Antibiotics. Fungi are really, really very beneficial. Wine is fermented using a fungus. Yeast, again. Without yeast, there wouldn't be wine. They're really good at recycling nutrients. They're good at breaking down corpses of trees, corpses of plants. I'm sure there are fungi that break down animals, but most of the time they're eating plants. They're great recyclers. They break down plants, they recycle those nutrients so they can be used again in the next generation. They create soil by breaking down plants. Fungi, they're actually very beneficial. We wouldn't have bread as you know it without fungus. We wouldn't have beer as you know it without yeast. We wouldn't have antibiotics as we know it without yeast. To explain this picture, so this is a petri dish. This petri dish has been inoculated with bacteria, and that's what these hazy marks are. These hazy marks are bacteria that are growing where they've been smeared on the petri dish. This big white dot in the center is specifically a mold. It is a mold of the Penicillium genus. What do you notice specifically about the relationship between the mold and the bacteria? You see this big gap where there is no bacteria growing close to the mold. That's called the Zone of Inhibition. And the way this happened, the way this was discovered, was an accident. The original scientist that discovered this was working on, he was a bacteriologist. He was inoculating a bunch of plates for an experiment he was doing. One of his plates got contaminated. The story is that he ate lunch in the lab and there was some mold growing on the bread for his sandwich. And a little bit of some of the spores from the mold landed on his petri dish. Well, he didn't know it had landed on his petri dish, and so when he put all those plates in the incubator, he pulled them out and his plants were contaminated. There was mold growing on them and he was mad because he had just wasted a whole day's worth of work, and so he was going to have to throw them away and he was going to have to start over and do it all over again. And he was in the process of throwing one of these plates in the trash. He looked and he saw that. He saw that zone of inhibition. He went, "Hey, what that little line there? Why ain't nothing growing right there? And from that, he discovered the stuff that we call penicillin. Penicillin being our first antibiotic.